You've got to be kidding me, Zexlorp. There's no way a measly human could have solved that equation faster than our entire class combined, Blurble exclaimed, his gelatinous form quivering with indignation. The classroom of the Galactic Institute of Higher Mathematics was in an uproar. Students from various corners of the universe, some with tentacles, others with multiple heads, and a few that were just sentient gas clouds, were all chattering, gurgling, and vibrating their opinions on the matter at hand. At the center of this interstellar kerfuffle stood Zexlorp, a quartzian being whose crystalline structure sparkled with embarrassment. I'm not joking, Blurb BL. I saw it with my own ocular facets. The human Jake, he just scribbled something on his datapad and handed it in. Professor Omega-9 nearly short-circuited trying to process it. From the back of the room, a bored voice cut through the cacophony. You know I can hear you all right. It's not like I have symbiotic algae for ears or anything. All eyes, stalks, and sensory appendages swiveled to face Jake Thompson, the only human in the class. He was lounging in his chair, feet propped up on the desk, idly tossing an apple from hand to hand. The sight of the fruit caused several of his classmates to recoil in horror. The idea of voluntarily ingesting part of another living organism was still a foreign concept to many. Oh, don't mind us, Jake chirped Glix-Glax, an avian-like creature with iridescent feathers. We're just discussing how you've managed to cheat on yet another impossible assignment. Nothing personal, you understand. It's just that your primate brain shouldn't be capable of such complex calculations. Jake caught the apple mid-toss and took a big, crunching bite, causing half the class to wince. First off, he said, speaking around the mouthful of fruit, it's ape, not primate, get your terrestrial taxonomy straight. Secondly, who says I cheated? Well, it's obvious, isn't it? Blurble burbled, his gelatinous form rippling with what passed for laughter in his species. You're from Earth, a death world. Your kind barely discovered space travel a few centuries ago. There's no way you could outperform the finest minds from the most advanced civilizations in the galaxy. Jake rolled his eyes so hard it looked like they might fall out of his skull, an action that caused several of his alien classmates to gasp, thinking it was some sort of human defense mechanism. Right, because being from a death world automatically makes me an idiot, Jake drawled, his voice dripping with sarcasm. It couldn't possibly be that surviving on a planet that's constantly trying to kill you might, oh, I don't know, sharpen your problem-solving skills a bit. The class fell silent, processing this novel concept. It was Zexlorp who finally spoke up, his crystalline voice tinkling like wind chimes. But the assignment was to calculate the gravitational flux of a binary pulsar system while accounting for quantum fluctuations in the surrounding dark matter field. It's beyond even our most advanced AI systems. Jake shrugged, taking another bite of his apple. Yeah, and sounds like a typical Tuesday night homework for a high school physics class back on Earth. The silence in the room was so profound you could have heard a neutrino drop. School Glix-Glax finally managed to squawk out. You mean to tell us this is the level of education you give to your young? Well, yeah, Jake said, tossing the apple core into a nearby recycling unit. I mean, not everyone takes advanced astrophysics in high school, but it's an option. How else are we supposed to prepare the next generation for the cutthroat world of intergalactic academia? The assembled aliens exchanged bewildered glances. The idea that humans would willingly subject their offspring to such mental rigors was almost as horrifying as Jake's casual consumption of plant matter. But how, Blurbly demanded, his gelatinous form now a turbulent whirlpool of confusion. How could you possibly solve an equation that stumped even the brightest minds from the Andromeda Institute of Quantum Mechanics? Jake sighed, realizing he wasn't going to get any peace until he explained. He stood up, stretched, causing several nearby aliens to flinch at the audible popping of his joints, and made his way to the holographic board at the front of the class. All right, gather round, class. Uncle Jake's about to blow your minds, figuratively speaking, of course. Wouldn't want any of you with easily ruptured cranial membranes to get the wrong idea. As the assorted aliens cautiously approached, Jake began to sketch out his solution on the board. His classmates watched in a mixture of awe and horror as complex equations and diagrams materialized before their eyes. You see, Jake explained, his tone somewhere between a lecture and a stand-up comedy routine. The trick is to approach the problem from a multidimensional perspective. You guys are all stuck thinking in linear time. But if you consider the gravitational effects across all possible quantum states simultaneously, He continued his explanation, peppering it with Earth-based analogies that left his audience more confused than ever. It's like trying to calculate the trajectory of a football during a game of underwater rugby. If the football was also a Schrodinger's cat and the field was actually the surface of a Mobius strip. By the time Jake finished his explanation, half the class was staring at him in slack-jawed amazement, while the other half seemed to be experiencing the alien equivalent of an existential crisis. And that's basically it, Jake concluded, dusting off his hands. Any questions? A tentative appendage rose from the back of the room. It belonged to Exeast, a being composed entirely of electromagnetic waves. Yes, what's a football? Jake face-palmed so hard the sound echoed through the classroom. Really? That's your takeaway from all this? Well, excuse us for not being well versed in the intricacies of Earth sports, Glix-Glax huffed, ruffling his feathers indignantly. Some of us were a bit preoccupied trying to comprehend how you turned the fundamental laws of physics into a pretzel. A what now? Exeast asked, even more confused. Oh, for the love of it's a type of food. Never mind, Jake groaned. Look, the point is, the solution isn't that complicated if you just think outside the box a little. Outside. The box, Blurb Beale repeated slowly, his gelatinous form morphing into a rough cube shape. But we're not in a box. The classroom is clearly a dodecahedron. Jake took a deep breath, reminding himself that patience was a virtue, especially when dealing with beings whose concept of metaphor was about as developed as a flatworm's understanding of interpretive dance. It's a figure of speech, he explained, with the tone of someone who had long since passed the point of exasperation and was now entering a zen-like state of resigned amusement. It means to think creatively, to approach a problem from an unexpected angle. Ah, I see, Zixlorp exclaimed, his crystalline structure vibrating with excitement. So when you say think outside the box, you actually mean consider alternative problem-solving methodologies beyond conventional paradigms? Jake blinked. Yeah, sure. Let's go with that. Just then, the classroom doors slid open with a soft hiss, revealing Professor Omega-9. The robotic instructor's lead eyes flickered rapidly as it scanned the room, taking in the scene before it. Students, it intoned in its melodious, synthesized voice, I trust you have been using this time productively to discuss the finer points of quantum gravitational theory. The aliens all began speaking at once, a cacophony of chirps, burbles, and electromagnetic pulses filling the air. Jake, meanwhile, simply leaned back against the holographic board, an amused smirk playing across his face. Professor Omega-9's head rotated a full 360 degrees, its equivalent of a confused head shake. One at a time, please. Zixlorp, perhaps you can summarize the class discussion. The Quartzian being sparkled nervously. Well, Professor, we were. That is to say, Jake was explaining how he solved the homework assignment. The robot's lead eyes blinked rapidly. Ah, yes, Mr. Thompson's solution. I must admit it was unexpected. That's one way of putting it, Blurb Beale muttered, earning him a sharp look from the professor's rear set of optical sensors. Indeed, Omega-9 continued, Mr. Thompson's approach to the problem was unorthodox, to say the least. However, after running the calculations through my quantum processor several trillion times, I can confirm that his solution is not only correct, but also elegantly simple. A collective gasp went through the classroom. Even Jake looked surprised. He hadn't been entirely sure his back-of-the-napkin calculations would hold up under scrutiny. But how, Glix-Glax squawked. How could a human from a backwater death world possibly outperform the most advanced minds in the galaxy? Professor Omega-9's eyes shifted to a soft blue hue, its equivalent of a gentle smile. Perhaps, Glix-Glax, that is precisely the reason. Mr. Thompson, would you care to elaborate? All eyes turned to Jake once again. He scratched the back of his head, suddenly feeling a bit self-conscious. Well, I guess it's like this. On Earth, we're kind of used to things trying to kill us all the time. Weather, wildlife, each other, you name it. It's probably tried to end our existence at some point. The class listened in rapt attention as Jake continued. So we've had to get pretty good at thinking on our feet, you know. When you're constantly facing new and unexpected challenges, you learn to approach problems from all angles. It's not about being smarter, really. It's about being adaptable. Fascinating, Professor Omega-9 hummed. And how does this relate to your solution for the gravitational flux problem? Jake grinned. Well, when I looked at the equation, I saw it kind of like a predator-prey relationship. The pulsars are the predators, the dark matter is the prey, and the gravitational flux is like the ecosystem they're operating in. Once I framed it that way, the solution just kind of fell into place. The classroom erupted into a flurry of excited chatter. Aliens were furiously taking notes, their appendages flying across datapads and neural interfaces.
Silence. Please, Professor Omega-9 called out, its voice cutting through the din. Mr. Thompson, your perspective is indeed enlightening. Perhaps there is much we can learn from the unique experiences of your species.
Jake couldn't help but laugh. Well, Prof, if you think this is mind-blowing, wait until I tell you guys about how we use our understanding of fluid dynamics to optimize the perfect pizza toss. The confused silence that followed was broken only by Edzate's tentative query, "What's a pizza?" Jake's eyes lit up with a mischievous gleam. "Oh boy, are you in for a treat? Well, metaphorically speaking, since I'm pretty sure half of you would dissolve if you tried to eat it." He strode back to the holographic board, erasing his previous equations with a wave of his hand. "All right, class, settle in for a crash course in Terran Culinary Physics 101. The aliens exchanged worried glances. They had signed up for advanced quantum mechanics, not whatever this culinary physics was. But curiosity, that universal trait that seemed to transcend species boundaries, got the better of them. Jake began sketching out a rough circle on the board. "So picture this. You've got a disk of dough, right? But not just any dough. This stuff's got gluten protein molecules that give it this amazing elastic property." Elastic. Dove Blur Beetle gurgled, his gelatinous form rippling with confusion. "You mean it's bouncy?" "Not exactly," Jake chuckled. "But close enough. Now, here's where it gets interesting. When you toss this dough into the air, you're not just showing off. You're actually using centrifugal force to stretch it out evenly." He proceeded to draw a series of diagrams, complete with force vectors and rotational axes. The aliens watched in fascinated horror as Jake described the complex interplay of physics and gastronomy. But that's not all, Jake continued, really getting into his impromptu lecture now. "You've got to factor in air resistance, the humidity of the room, even the microscopic variations in the dough's surface tension. It's a delicate balance, you see. Too much force, and you'll tear the dough. Too little, and you won't get that perfect circular shape." Professor Omega-9, who had been silently observing this unexpected turn of events, finally spoke up. "Mr. Thompson, are you suggesting that your species has developed a branch of physics dedicated solely to the preparation of food?" Jake grinned. "Oh, Prof, you have no idea. We've got entire institutes dedicated to food science. Ever heard of molecular gastronomy? It's like quantum mechanics, but for your taste buds." The class erupted into a cacophony of questions, each alien trying to wrap their various cognitive apparatuses around this bizarre concept.
But why? Zixlorp's crystalline voice cut through the din. Why expend so much mental energy on something as trivial as sustenance?
Jake's smile faded a bit, replaced by a thoughtful expression. "You know, that's a fair question, I guess. Well, it goes back to what I was saying earlier about Earth being a death world."
He leaned against the desk, his tone becoming more serious. When you're living on a planet where everything's trying to kill you, food becomes more than just fuel. It's comfort, it's culture, it's a way of bringing people together. And yeah, maybe spending hours perfecting the art of tossing a pizza seems silly to you guys, but for us, it's a way of taking control, you know? Of saying, hey, universe, you might be trying to wipe us out, but we're going to create something beautiful and delicious anyway.
A hush fell over the classroom as the aliens pondered this. Even Professor Omega-9 seemed to be processing this new information, its lead eyes flickering through a rainbow of colors. It was Glix-Glax who broke the silence. I think I understand," the avian alien said slowly. "It's like how my species developed our complex mating dances. In the face of constant predation, we found beauty and meaning in movement."
Jake snapped his fingers, pointing at Glix-Glax with a grin. "Exactly. See, you guys get it after all."
Blur BL, who had been uncharacteristically quiet, suddenly burbled up. "But Jake, this still doesn't explain how you solved the gravitational flux problem." Jake laughed. "Doesn't it, though? It's all about perspective, Blur Blee. When you're used to looking at the universe through the lens of how can I turn this into a tasty meal without dying, suddenly a little thing like quantum mechanics doesn't seem so intimidating." Professor Omega-9 stepped forward, its metallic form gleaming under the classroom lights. Students, I believe we have stumbled upon something quite remarkable here. Mr. Thompson's unique perspective doesn't just offer a solution to our immediate problem, it opens up entirely new avenues of scientific inquiry. The robot turned to Jake, its voice modulator somehow conveying a sense of excitement. Mr. Thompson, how would you feel about leading a seminar on, what shall we call it? Adaptive problem-solving lessons from a death world.
Jake blinked, taken aback. Me? Teach? But I'm just a student.
A student who has demonstrated a remarkable ability to think outside the conventional parameters, Omega-9 countered. I believe your fellow students could benefit greatly from your insights. The aliens in the classroom looked at Jake with a mixture of curiosity, apprehension, and in some cases, what passed for excitement in their respective species. Zixlorp's crystalline structure was vibrating at a frequency that could only be described as eager, while Blur's gelatinous form had taken on a hue that Jake had learned to associate with intense interest. Jake rubbed the back of his neck, a nervous human habit that never failed to fascinate his alien classmates. I mean, I guess I could give it a shot. But you guys have to promise not to freak out when I start talking about some of the crazier aspects of Earth life. Deal. A chorus of agreement rippled through the classroom, expressed in various alien languages and communication methods. Professor Omega-9's lead eyes blinked in a pattern that Jake had come to recognize as satisfaction. Excellent, the robotic professor intoned. We shall schedule your first seminar for next week. I look forward to seeing how this experiment in cross-species education unfolds. As the class began to disperse, still buzzing with excitement over the day's unexpected turn of events, Jake found himself surrounded by a small group of his most curious classmates. Glix-Glax was the first to speak up, his iridescent feathers ruffling with barely contained enthusiasm. Jake, I simply must know, what other Death World skills have you humans developed? Are they all as fascinatingly complex as this pizza tossing you mentioned? Jake couldn't help but laugh. Oh man, where do I even start? We've turned practically everything into an art form or a science. You should see what we've done with coffee.
Coffee exists electromagnetic form pulsed with curiosity. Is that another form of sustenance? Sort of. Jake grinned. It's a beverage we make from roasted beans. But it's so much more than that. It's fuel for all-night study sessions, social lubricant for awkward first dates, and the lifeblood of our entire civilization.
Blur's gelatinous form rippled with confusion. You derive your civilization's energy from a bean-based liquid. How primitively charming. Jake rolled his eyes. It's a figure of speech, Blur. Although he paused, a mischievous glint in his eye, I wouldn't be surprised if some of our engineers have tried to power a spacecraft with espresso. The aliens exchanged bewildered glances, clearly unsure whether Jake was joking or not. It was a common occurrence in their interactions with the human.
As they made their way out of the classroom, Zixlorp's crystalline voice chimed in. Jake, I've been analyzing your problem-solving methodology, and I have a query. Does your species always approach challenges through the lens of survival?
Jake considered this for a moment as they walked down the holographically enhanced hallway of the Galactic Institute. The walls shimmered with real-time representations of various cosmic phenomena, a black hole consuming a star here, a supernova explosion there. Not always, he finally replied. But I think it's ingrained in our psychology, you know. Even when we're not in immediate danger, there's this part of our brain that's always on alert, always looking for creative solutions to potential threats. Fascinating, Zixlorp hummed. And how does this mindset manifest in your everyday life? Jake chuckled. Ma'am, well, let's see. We turn practically everything into a competition. We have sports where we deliberately put ourselves in danger for fun. We create art that explores the darkest aspects of our psyche. We even have a holiday where we dress up as the things that scare us and give candy to children. The aliens fell silent, trying to process this information. It was Glix-Glax who finally spoke up, his avian features contorted in what Jake had learned was an expression of deep confusion. But why, Glix-Glax chirped, why deliberately seek out danger and fear? Surely the logical course of action would be to minimize risk and maximize safety. Jake shrugged. You'd think so, right? But here's the thing for us. Comfort isn't always comfortable. We thrive on challenge, on pushing our limits. It's like Imagine if you never used your wings, glix-glax, they'd atrophy, become useless. We see our capacity for problem-solving the same way. If we don't exercise it, we lose it.
As they reached the grand atrium of the Institute, with its swirling nebula ceiling and anti-gravity lounging areas, the group paused. The aliens seemed to be deep in thought, processing this new perspective on human psychology.
It was Professor Omega-9, who had silently accompanied the group, that broke the contemplative silence. Students, I believe we are witnessing a pivotal moment in galactic education. Mr. Thompson's insights offer us a unique opportunity to expand our understanding of problem-solving and adaptation.
The robot's lead eyes flickered through a series of complex patterns before settling on a warm amber glow. I propose we expand Mr. Thompson's seminar into a full course. Deathworld Dynamics lessons in adaptive problem-solving will invite experts from other species that evolved in high-stress environments. This could revolutionize our approach to galactic challenges.
The excitement among the alien students was palpable. Jack's East electromagnetic form was pulsing so rapidly it was almost painful to look at, while Blur Bleal had shifted into a shape that Jake could only describe as an enthusiastic squiggle. "Oh man," Jake groaned, though he couldn't hide the smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. "What have I gotten myself into?" "The opportunity of a lifetime," Mr. Thompson, Professor Omega-9 replied, its voice modulator somehow conveying a sense of warmth. "Or should I say, Professor Thompson?" Jake's eyes widened. "Wait, what? Professor? But I'm still a student. In quantum mechanics, perhaps the robot acknowledged. But in the field of Deathworld dynamics, you are currently the foremost expert in our galaxy. Unless, of course, you'd prefer we invite another human to lead the course." The thought of any of his fellow humans being turned loose on this unsuspecting alien academy was enough to make Jake shudder. He could just imagine his roommate, Mike, trying to explain the intricacies of Earth's most dangerous sport, competitive hot dog eating. No, Jake said hastily. "I'll do it. Someone's got to represent Earth without causing an interstellar incident." As the group dispersed, each heading off to their respective habitats for the night cycle, Jake found himself alone with Professor Omega-9 in the softly glowing atrium. "I must confess, Mr. Thompson," the robot said, its voice lowered to a conspiratorial whisper, an impressive feat for a being without lungs. "I had my doubts when the exchange program first brought you here. I feared you might struggle to keep up with our advanced curriculum." Jake raised an eyebrow. "And now," the professor's lead eyes twinkled literally, "now, I find myself wondering if perhaps it is we who need to catch up to you." As Jake made his way back to his quarters, his mind was abuzz with ideas for his upcoming seminar. He'd start with the basics, of course, a crash course in Earth's geology and climate, a brief overview of the more terrifying aspects of human history. But where to go from there? He could delve into the psychology of risk-taking, the evolutionary advantages of curiosity, maybe a practical demonstration of human problem-solving skills. He grinned at the thought of introducing his alien classmates to escape rooms or, better yet, Dungeons & Dragons. As he entered his room, Jake's eyes fell on the small terrarium he kept on his desk. Inside, a tiny cactus stood defiantly, its spines gleaming under the artificial sunlight. It was a small piece of Earth, a constant reminder of the harsh beauty of his homeworld. Jake smiled, reaching out to gently touch the glass. "Well, little guy," he murmured, "looks like we've got some teaching to do. Time to show this galaxy what Earthlings are really made of." As he settled in for the night, Jake couldn't help but feel a surge of pride. He might be just one human in a vast, alien universe, but today he'd taken the first step towards bridging the gap between worlds. And who knew? Maybe, just maybe, by sharing the lessons learned on their unforgiving homeworld, humans could help create a safer, more adaptable galaxy for all species. With that thought warming his heart, Jake drifted off to sleep, dreaming of pizza-tossing competitions in zero-gravity and interstellar coffee shops, where humans and aliens could share stories of their wildest problem-solving adventures. Little did he know, his impromptu lesson had already set in motion a chain of events that would revolutionize galactic education. In the coming weeks, news of the Deathworld dynamics course would spread across the cosmos, drawing curious students and skeptical academics from every corner of the known universe. And at the center of it all would be Jake Thompson, the unassuming human who had turned a simple homework assignment into a galactic phenomenon. Armed with nothing but his wit, his unique Earthling perspective, and an endless supply of baffling terrestrial metaphors, he was about to take the academic world by storm. As for his alien classmates, they were in for the educational adventure of a lifetime. After all, they had yet to experience the mind-bending complexities of human idioms, the terror of Earth's wildlife documentaries, or the existential crisis induced by contemplating the plot of Inception. But that, as they say on Earth, is a story for another day. Or, as Jake would put it much to his classmates' confusion, that's a whole other can of worms, folks. And trust me, you're not ready for the can opener just yet. The Galactic Institute of Higher Mathematics was about to get a crash course in Earthling 101, and the universe would never be the same again.